A strange encounter, a desperate plea, a choice that could change everything. What if an alien girl stood before you, asking for something you never expected? Stay till the end to find out what happens next in this thrilling, emotional story. The bar forest stretched endlessly, its towering trees casting long shadows under the pale glow of an unfamiliar moon. The air was thick with dampness, carrying the scent of earth and foliage. Liam's breath came in shallow bursts as he navigated the uneven terrain, his body aching from exhaustion. 3 days. 3 days stranded on this strange planet with no food, no water, and no sign of rescue. His ship, once his lifeline, was now a broken ruin lying miles away. The crash had been violent, a fiery descent from the cold void of space. He had barely made it out alive. Now survival was all that mattered. Each step was a struggle, his limbs heavy with fatigue. Hunger gnawed at his insides, his throat raw from thirst. He needed to find shelter, water, anything to keep himself from collapsing. But the planet was merciless, its unfamiliar landscape offering no solace. Then he saw her. A figure stood just beyond the trees, bathed in silver light. For a moment, Liam thought he was hallucinating, that his desperate mind had conjured some illusion to taunt him. But she was real. She had the shape of a woman, tall and slender, her violet skin smooth and unblemished. Her long silver hair cascaded down her back, catching the moonlight in a way that made it seem almost ethereal. Her golden eyes, large and unblinking, bore into his with an intensity that made his breath hitch. But what unsettled him most wasn't her alien features. It was the fact that she stood completely bare, as if clothing was an afterthought. Liam took a step back, his heart pounding. She didn't move. She simply watched him, as if waiting for something. "You were looking at me when I was without clothes, human," she finally spoke, her voice smooth, yet laced with something unrecognizable. "Now you need to breed me, or you will kill me." His mind reeled, struggling to process the words. Had he misheard? Was this some kind of trick? "Excuse me?" His voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "My kind, we do not wear coverings as you do. I have observed your kind. I know what this means to you. I saw the way your body reacted." Liam's face burned. "That's not—" He stopped himself, frustration mixing with confusion. "Look, I don't know what you think you saw, but I wasn't— "You desire," she interrupted, taking a single step forward, "and I require. It is the way of survival." Liam took another step back, his pulse hammering against his skull. "You're saying if this doesn't happen, you'll die?" She nodded once. "My cycle has begun. If I do not find a mate, my body will shut down. I will perish." A sick feeling settled in his gut. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. He had been through too much to suddenly find himself in some twisted scenario that sounded more like a fever dream than reality. "There has to be another way," he said. "A cure. Medicine? Something that can stop this." "There is none." Her voice was steady, but there was something beneath it, a quiet vulnerability that made his chest tighten. "It must be fulfilled, or I die." Liam swallowed hard, his mind racing. There had to be another way. There always was. He wasn't some kind of savior. He was just a man, a lost man, stranded on a planet with no way home. "Why me?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. The alien girl studied him, her golden eyes searching his face. "You are the only one here, and I chose you." Liam couldn't look away. There was something in her gaze that rooted him in place, something raw and unspoken. "You are not like the others I have studied," she continued. "You do not act out of greed or cruelty. You look at me differently." His breath caught. A gust of wind rustled the trees, carrying a faint, unfamiliar scent. The air between them was heavy with unspoken words, with something fragile yet undeniable. She took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "Please," she whispered, "do not let me die." Liam's hands curled into fists. Every logical part of him screamed to walk away, to find another solution. But logic had no place here, not when she stood before him, her life hanging in the balance. The fire flickered between them as Liam sat in silence, staring into the flames. The alien girl sat across from him, her gaze steady, waiting. He had spent the last hour trying to find a way out of this, but there was none. The planet was silent except for the distant rustle of wind. The loneliness of it all weighed down on him. He had been ready to die here, stranded and forgotten. But now she had given him something he hadn't expected: purpose. He looked at her again, noticing the way her breathing had changed. It was shallower now, her skin slightly paler than before. Time was running out. She shivered suddenly, her arms wrapping around herself. "I feel it," she murmured. The weakness. Liam clenched his jaw. He couldn't ignore the desperation in her voice. Slowly, cautiously, he reached out. His fingers brushed against hers, and she gasped softly, her golden eyes widening. "This isn't just about survival, is it?" he asked. She hesitated before shaking her head. "No, it is about trust." His heart pounded. Trust. That was something neither of them had expected to find here. The night stretched on, the fire crackling between them. The warmth of her skin lingered against his fingertips. Liam took a deep breath, realizing the truth. His decision had already been made. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of violet and gold. Liam sat at the edge of the clearing, watching the alien girl as she stood, facing the rising sun. Her posture was stronger now, her movements filled with a quiet grace. She looked alive. He swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. The night before had been more than just survival. It had been something deeper, something unspoken between them. "I owe you my life," she said, her voice soft. Liam shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." She turned to face him, a small smile playing at her lips. "Then allow me to stay with you, to protect you, as you have protected me." A lump formed in his throat. He had expected her to leave, to return to wherever she had come from. But instead, she was choosing to stay. As they stood together beneath the alien sky, Liam realized something. He wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, he never would be again. The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken thoughts. Liam found himself staring at the alien girl. No, not just an alien. She had a name. She had to. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice rough from exhaustion. She tilted her head slightly, considering the question as though it was foreign to her. "My people do not use names as you do," she admitted. "We are known by our purpose, our function." Liam frowned. "That's impersonal. What do others call you?" A pause, then her golden eyes softened. "I was called Ara once, before I was exiled." The word exiled struck him like a hammer, so she wasn't just stranded here by chance. She had been sent here, abandoned. "Why?" he asked before he could stop himself. Ara lowered her gaze, her silver hair shifting over her shoulders. "I broke the laws of my kind. I disobeyed, and for that I was cast out." Liam studied her, watching how tension coiled through her frame. She was strong, but she was also alone, just like him. "I know what that's like," he murmured. Ara's eyes flickered back to him, curiosity replacing her guarded expression. "You do?" Liam let out a bitter chuckle, shaking his head. "I was a soldier once. I followed orders, until one day I didn't. I did what I thought was right, and my people turned their backs on me. That's why I ended up here." For the first time, something in Ara's gaze softened, something almost understanding. "We are the same, then," she said quietly. The weight of her words settled between them. Two exiles, two souls abandoned by their own. A gust of wind stirred the trees, and Liam suddenly realized how much his body ached. His wounds from the crash still burned, the exhaustion threatening to pull him under. He needed rest, but something in Ara's posture shifted, her senses alert, her eyes scanning the trees. "What is it?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned her head slightly, as if listening to something he couldn't hear. Then she whispered, "We are not alone." A chill ran down Liam's spine. He reached for the crude knife he had carved from scrap metal, his fingers tightening around the hilt. "Who?" Ara took a step closer to him, her voice barely above a breath. "Hunters." Liam's heart pounded. "Your people?" She shook her head. "Number worse." A rustling sound echoed through the trees, low and deliberate. Liam felt his stomach knot. He knew the sound of a predator stalking its prey. Then the first shadow moved. The creature emerged from the underbrush, tall, hunched, with a chitinous exoskeleton that glistened under the pale light. Its many eyes gleamed with a predatory hunger, and when it bared its fangs, a thick, viscous liquid dripped from its maw. Liam barely had time to react before another appeared, then another. 3. Ara's posture shifted, her muscles tensing. "They have been tracking me, waiting for me to be weak." Liam tightened his grip on his knife. "They don't look like they want to have a conversation." "They do not." One of the creatures let out a guttural hiss, its sharp limbs twitching. Liam had seen enough wildlife in his time to recognize an ambush. These things weren't just watching, they were testing them. "They think we're easy prey," he muttered. Ara exhaled slowly. "Then we show them otherwise." The first creature lunged. Liam barely had time to move before it was upon him, its razor-sharp limbs swiping at his chest. He ducked, rolling to the side just as Ara sprang forward with an agility that seemed almost supernatural. She moved like liquid, her body twisting midair as she struck with a force that sent the creature staggering. Liam didn't have time to marvel at her strength. The second creature came for him. He sidestepped the initial strike, swinging his knife in a wide arc. The blade met resistance as it sliced across the creature's exoskeleton, black ichor spraying from the wound. The thing shrieked, a high-pitched grating sound that sent a shiver down his spine. Then it retaliated. Pain exploded across Liam's side as one of its claws raked against him, tearing through his shirt. He stumbled, but he couldn't afford to fall. If he did, he was dead. Ara's voice rang out. "Move!" Liam barely had time to react before she was there, striking the creature with a precise blow that sent it reeling. Her golden eyes burned with intensity as she turned to face the last attacker. But this one was different. It didn't lunge blindly like the others. It watched, waited. Liam knew that kind of patience, the kind that belonged to something smarter, more dangerous. Then it spoke. A series of clicking sounds emerged from its throat, almost like a language. Liam didn't understand it, but Ara's body tensed in response. "What did it say?" he asked, breathing hard. Ara didn't take her eyes off the creature. "It says, I belong to them." Liam felt something hot coil in his chest. "Like hell you do." The creature's mandibles twitched as if amused. Then without warning it lunged, not at Ara, but at him. Liam barely had time to raise his knife before it was on him, its claws tearing into his arm. Pain flared, white-hot, but he didn't let go of his weapon. He drove it upward, forcing the blade into the soft part of the creature's underbelly. The thing shrieked, its body convulsing, but it wasn't dead yet. Ara moved in a blur, her movements precise and lethal. She drove her fist into the creature's chest, her strength shattering its exoskeleton like glass. The creature let out one final rattling breath before collapsing in a heap. Silence. Liam panted, his hands slick with blood, his and theirs. His body ached, his vision swam, but they were alive. Ara crouched beside him, her golden eyes scanning his wounds. "You are hurt." Liam let out a breathless chuckle. "Yeah, feels like it." She hesitated for a moment before pressing a hand to his wound. A strange warmth spread through him, and he sucked in a sharp breath. "What are you—" "Healing," she murmured. Liam blinked as the pain began to dull, the bleeding slowing. He stared at her, his mind reeling. "You can do that?" Ara's expression was unreadable. "Not for much longer. My strength is limited." Liam exhaled, the weight of everything crashing down on him. He looked at the fallen creatures, then back at her. "They're not going to stop, are they?" he asked. Ara shook her head. "Number?" "They will send more." Liam ran a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "Great, just what I needed. More alien monsters trying to kill me." Ara's lips twitched slightly, almost like a smile. "You are not alone in this fight, Liam." His chest tightened at the way she said his name. He looked at her, really looked at her, and he realized something. She wasn't just some alien. She wasn't just a survivor like him. She was his ally. Maybe even something more. Liam took a deep breath, pushing himself to his feet despite the pain. He looked toward the darkened horizon, the knowledge settling in his bones. If they wanted to survive, they needed to be ready. Because the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Liam sat by the smouldering remains of the fire, his knife resting loosely in his grip. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving his limbs heavy and his mind thick with exhaustion. Ara moved silently around their small camp, gathering supplies, her silver hair catching the faint glow of the embers. They had survived, but for how long? The creatures that had attacked them weren't just wild predators. They had intelligence. Liam had seen it in the way the last one watched them, how it calculated its attack, and it had spoken. Even though Liam couldn't understand the clicking language, Ara had. He needed answers. "You knew what that thing was saying," Liam said, breaking the silence. His voice was rough, his throat dry. Ara stilled for a moment before lowering herself onto a rock across from him. "Yes," she admitted. Liam's grip on his knife tightened. "Then talk." Ara's golden eyes flickered toward the dark tree line as if expecting more creatures to emerge. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "They are called the Karth. They are not of my kind, but we share a history, a dark one." Liam frowned. "You mean war?" "Slavery," she corrected. The word made Liam's stomach twist. He had seen war. He had seen cruelty. But there was something in Ara's voice that carried the weight of something worse. "My people once ruled over the Karthar. Long ago we were superior. At least, that is what we believed." She exhaled, her fingers curling into her palms. "We used them for labor, for war, for other things." Liam didn't need her to elaborate. He could fill in the blanks. "But they broke free," he guessed. Ara nodded. "They evolved, they learned, turned. And when they struck back, they did so without mercy. They do not forget, and they do not forgive." Liam rubbed a hand over his face. "So that thing back there wasn't just hunting you, it was claiming you." "Yes." Silence stretched between them. The wind stirred the leaves, carrying with it the distant sounds of the alien night. Liam looked at Ara, at the way her shoulders tensed at the shadows behind her, her golden eyes wary. "Is that why you were exiled?" Ara hesitated. "You said you disobeyed. What did you do?" Her fingers traced over a scar on her forearm, an old wound, faded but not forgotten. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I refused to take part in the war against them. I freed the Karth captives instead of killing them. Liam's chest tightened. He wasn't sure what he had expected, but it wasn't that. You spared them? He murmured. Ara gave a bitter smile. My people saw it as betrayal. I was stripped of my status, of my rights, and then I was abandoned here. Liam exhaled slowly. He wasn't sure why, but something inside him ached at her words. Maybe because, for the first time, he understood her. He had disobeyed. He had done what he thought was right, and it had cost him everything. He met her gaze. You did the right thing. Ara's lips parted slightly, as if she hadn't expected that, as if no one had ever told her that before. Before she could respond, a distant sound echoed through the trees, a low, guttural clicking. Both of them went still. Liam's hand instinctively gripped his knife, his muscles tensing. They're still hunting us. Ara stood, her body rigid with tension. They will not stop, not until I am theirs. Liam pushed himself up, ignoring the ache in his limbs. Then we don't wait for them to come to us. Ara arched a brow. You suggest we hunt them? Liam smirked. I suggest we take control of the situation. We don't stand a chance if they pick us off one by one. We need to move. Find shelter. A real one. Ara considered this for a moment before nodding. I know of a place. Liam gestured for her to lead the way, and together they disappeared into the darkness. The journey was grueling. Ara moved with a predator's grace, her bare feet silent against the damp earth. Liam followed, his movements less fluid, but no less determined. The alien jungle was alive with noise, distant shrieks, rustling leaves, the occasional snap of something moving beyond sight. He hated being hunted. The Karth were out there. He could feel it in his gut. After what felt like hours, the trees thinned, revealing the jagged entrance of a cave nestled between massive stone cliffs. Vines draped over the opening, partially concealing it from view. Ara stepped forward, placing a hand against the stone. It was once a shelter, she said. Before I was exiled, I found it while searching for food. It is deep, hidden. Liam exhaled, stepping inside. The cave was cool, the scent of damp earth filling his nostrils. As his eyes adjusted, he noted the way the walls stretched back into the darkness, forming a natural tunnel. This will work, he muttered. Ara moved further inside, her gaze sweeping the space. It will not hold forever, but for now, we can rest. Liam let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His body screamed for rest, but his mind wouldn't let him. Instead, he turned to Ara. We need a plan. She regarded him carefully. A plan for what? For survival, he said. For fighting back. Arara's gaze darkened. You wish to fight the Karth? Liam crossed his arms. I don't see any other choice. They won't stop coming and I'm not running forever. Arara studied him for a long moment. Then slowly, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of her lips. You are not like the others I have met, she murmured. Liam raised a brow. That a compliment? She turned away, moving toward the cave wall. Perhaps. Liam shook his head, chuckling softly. Great. I'm taking that as a yes, then. Something changed. A sharp, unnatural click echoed through the cave. Arara's body stiffened. Liam immediately dropped into a defensive stance, his fingers tightening around his weapon. Tell me that was just a rock shifting. Arara's golden eyes glowed faintly in the dark. It was not. A shadow moved in the entrance. Liam didn't hesitate. He lunged, throwing himself toward the intruder, his knife flashing in the dim light. The Caliph was fast. Too fast. It dodged his strike with ease, its multi-jointed limbs twisting unnaturally. It hissed, its mandibles clicking as it lunged toward Arara. She was ready. In one fluid motion, she sidestepped, driving a sharpened stone into the creature's throat. The Karth let out a sickening gurgle, its body convulsing, before it collapsed to the ground. Liam panted, adrenaline surging through his veins. Well, that was fun. Arara didn't respond. She was already crouching beside the dead Karth, her expression unreadable. "What are you?" Her fingers moved over its body, searching. Then she froze. Liam didn't like that. "Arara, what is it?" She turned to him, her golden eyes wide. This one was a scout. Liam's stomach dropped. "You mean—" Before he could finish, a low, bone-chilling howl echoed from the jungle. Arara's face was grim. "They know where we are." Liam cursed under his breath, gripping his knife tighter. No more running, no more hiding. If the Kayath wanted a fight, he was ready to give them one. Liam gritted his teeth as the distant howls of the Karth reverberated through the night air. They were closing in fast. His pulse pounded in his ears, but he forced himself to stay calm. Running wasn't an option anymore. This was their stand. Arara rose from the dead scout's side, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim cave. "They will attack soon. We must be ready." Liam nodded, quickly scanning the cave. They had the advantage of cover, but it wouldn't mean much against creatures that could see in the dark and move faster than any human. They needed a plan. He knelt beside the fallen Karth, prying its weapon from its twisted fingers. The wraith blade was sleek and curved, its edges humming with an eerie energy. It felt unnatural in his grip, but deadly. "How many do you think are coming?" he asked. Arara tilted her head, listening to the night beyond the cave entrance. Her expression darkened. "At least a dozen, maybe more." Liam exhaled sharply. "Great, outnumbered, outmatched. Fantastic odds." A hint of a smirk touched Arara's lips. "Perhaps, but they are not expecting us to fight." Liam glanced at her, noting the flicker of something else in her gaze. Determination. "Then we make them regret it," he said. They got to work. Arara moved with practiced efficiency, her hands gathering sharp stones and makeshift weapons. Liam, meanwhile, scanned the cave for any advantage. His gaze landed on the loose rocks near the entrance, the heavy boulders above. An idea sparked in his mind. "If we can lure them inside," he murmured, "we can bring the rocks down on them." Arara's eyes flickered with understanding. "A trap." Liam nodded. "They'll think they have us cornered, but we control this space. We use it." Arara wasted no time. With her inhuman strength, she began loosening the stones along the cave's ceiling, preparing for the moment they needed to strike. Liam readied his weapons, placing himself near the entrance. Every muscle in his body was coiled tight, waiting for the onslaught. Then the night fell silent. Liam's stomach clenched. "They're here," Arara whispered. A moment later, shadows moved at the entrance. The Karth emerged from the darkness, their glowing eyes fixated on Arara. Their bodies slithered forward, sleek and lethal, their mandibles clicking in unison. One of them, a larger one, stepped forward. Its voice was a deep, guttural hiss. It spoke in its strange, clicking language. Arara's face remained unreadable. But then she responded. Liam had no idea what she said, but the effect was immediate. The Karth mandibles flared in what looked like rage. Then they attacked. The first Karth lunged. Liam was ready. He sidestepped, driving the stolen alien blade deep into its chest. The creature let out a strangled hiss before collapsing. Another came at him from the side, its claws swiping at his throat. Liam barely ducked in time, feeling the rush of air as the strike missed him by inches. He twisted, kicking out hard, sending the Karth staggering back. Arara moved like a phantom. Her hands became blades, striking with precision and speed. She twisted around an enemy, her movements fluid, almost graceful, as she cut them down one by one. But more kept coming. Liam barely had time to react as two Karth charged him at once. He managed to slice one across the chest, but the other tackled him to the ground. Pain exploded through his ribs. The creature's mandibles opened wide, ready to tear out his throat. A sharp whistle cut through the air. Arara! A heartbeat later, a rock came crashing down from above. The Karth barely had time to react before the entire ceiling collapsed, burying them under tons of stone. Dust and debris filled the cave. Liam coughed, pushing himself up, his lungs burning. Arara appeared beside him, her silver hair streaked with dirt, her chest rising and falling with exertion. But her eyes, they burned with victory. The remaining Karth hissed in panic. For the first time they hesitated. And Liam saw it. The first flicker of fear in their alien faces. "Go!" Arara commanded in their tongue. Her voice was cold, final. The Karth fled. The night swallowed them whole. For a long time, neither Liam nor Arara spoke. The battle was over. They had won. Liam let out a shaky breath, rubbing his sore ribs. That went well. Arara shot him a wry look. You were almost eaten. Details, he muttered. A chuckle escaped her, soft but real, and for the first time Liam realized something. They had survived. Together. He met her gaze. You okay? Arara hesitated, then she nodded. Yes. A comfortable silence settled between them. The weight of exhaustion pulled at Liam's limbs, but he ignored it. Instead, he looked at Arara, really looked at her. She had been exiled, hunted, betrayed by her own kind. And yet, she fought. She survived. Liam exhaled, rolling his shoulders. So what now? Arara tilted her head, considering. Then her lips curled into the smallest hint of a smile. Now, she said, we rebuild. Liam smirked. Together? Her golden eyes softened. Together.